Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. So there's not much in the slides, so I'll just skip the slides and just teach directly. Inshallah. So we left off, we finished Jummah prayer, right? And we were talking about prayer when you're injured. Okay, so if you're ever injured and you need to pray, depends on what your injury is. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made an exception. Whenever it's difficult for you to do something, there's an exception so that you're not overburdened and you don't have to harm your body or something like that. So there's a few rules when it comes to that. So if you are not able to stand because your foot hurts or you have a stomach ache or whatever it is, you're allowed to pray while you're sitting down. But if you're able to make a ruku', to bow, or you're able to make sajda fully, like completely, then you pray while you're sitting, but you have to still make a full bowing and prostration. So if you're going to pray like this, Allahu Akbar, and then when it comes time for ruku', you're going to stand up and you're going to go into the full bowing position, right? So this is important because some people make this mistake, and what they do is they say, well, if I can't stand because my foot hurts a lot, then I'm just going to skip the full bowing as well. But you shouldn't be doing that. If you can bow and prostrate fully, then you can sit while praying, but then you do the full bowing and the full prostration. If you cannot do that, then you can sit and you can make the ruku' and you can make the sajda, the bowing and the prostration. You can do it while sitting. So how do you do that? So when you're praying like this, you're going to be, folding your arms over, say, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And when it's time to bow, what you're going to do is you're just going to bend over, put your hands on your knees, and you're going to bend down like this and make a gesture for your bowing. And you're going to make a lower gesture for your prostration. The key is to make sure that the prostration gesture is going to be lower than the bowing gesture. That's what matters the most. Okay, so, you make sure that you're doing that. So make sure it's lower. If you're not able to sit even, then in that case, what do? You can lie down. You can lie down and you can perform your prayer even while you're lying down. Now, if you're lying down, which direction should you be facing? Face the Qibla. How do you face the Qibla when you're lying down?
Your face towards it, I'm assuming?
So there's two ways. Because yes, it's your face towards it. Let's say you're lying down in a hospital bed or something. May Allah save us. There's two ways to lie down. If you're lying on your back, maybe you have like a head, pillow behind your head, then your face is technically going to be in the direction of your feet. So some people will say, but your feet are towards the Qibla. It's true. Your feet are towards the Qibla, but it's your face that's towards the Qibla too. So that's perfectly fine to do that. But there's a second option. Second option is if you're lying down, you can actually lie on your right side. And if you're lying down on your right side, your face is going to be facing towards that direction over there, towards the Qibla. So either one of these two ways is perfectly fine. If you're going to lie on your back, you're going to face towards your feet direction because that's where your face is. If you're going to lie on your side, your face is going to be facing towards Mecca. So whichever direction you're facing, you're still going to be facing towards Mecca, which is the Qibla.
What if, for instance, let's say Qibla is somewhere on the back side and the feet is outside of the Qibla?
What was it?
What if, for instance, you're lying in the bed and feet are looking to the opposite direction from the Qibla?
Oh, if you're turning the other way around?
Yeah.
So what you do is, let's say, what's the easiest way to turn yourself, right? So if you're able to turn, have them turn the bed around for you. And if it's difficult for them to turn the bed around too much, then you have them turn the bed around enough that at least you could turn to your right side and face the Qibla. You try your best. If they say, no, we have tubes connected to you, we cannot move the bed at all, then you pray in any direction you can because you can't move. It's painful to move and the bed cannot move. Then you try to move yourself. If you cannot, you pray in any direction. Okay. So if you're sick or you're injured, if you're unconscious for more than 5 prayers, you don't need to make them up. But if you're unconscious for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 prayers, when you wake up, you're going to make them up. So imagine somebody's in a coma for 3 months and then they wake up and say, Alhamdulillah, you woke up. Now you have to make up 3 months of prayers. No, you don't have to, but still you should make up. So the rule technically is that the scholars have come up with is If you're unconscious for more than 5 prayers, you do not make up any of the prayers. If you're unconscious for less than 5 prayers, you'll make up whatever you missed. All right. So if you're in a coma for 3 months, you're not making up any of your prayers. But if you are knocked out from some surgery or car accident or something, and you wake up 3 prayers later, you're going to make up all those 3 prayers. Okay. Now, any questions on prayer when injured?
Yeah. Wait, so about the, when they're on the bed and they can turn around, right, and rest, like what if it feels painful for them? Like, do they is that like recommended to do, or like?
No. It's not recommended to feel more pain than normal pain. What is normal pain? The pain when you're fasting. You're supposed to feel some discomfort, right? But in terms of actual pain, no, that's too much. It's the same thing when it comes to fasting. Like, for example, when you're sick, you're excused from fasting, right? But if you have like a little headache, that's part of fasting. That's normal.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to do that. Okay. Yeah.
Wait, so like the Kaaba is a cube though, right? So like technically anywhere you stand to, like, aren't you facing it still?
You mean anywhere in the world?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
anywhere on the planet.
Anywhere on the planet. Yeah. So technically, but what you're doing is you're facing the shortest distance to the Kaaba.
Oh.
Because yes, the earth is kind of round, mostly round. But if we applied that rule, then if you put your back towards the Kaaba, you're facing the other side of the Kaaba by going around the world. It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's the shortest distance to the Kaaba. Okay. Anything else on injured prayer? Prayer when injured? Okay. Then prayer when traveling. Okay, so when you're traveling, Allah has made life easier for you as well, because usually travel involves disruption of sleep patterns. It involves, especially in the past, it involved much more difficulty. Even with modern day transportation today, we find that there's still jet lag, and there's, change of time zones and so many other things that make travel kind of difficult for people. So Allah wanted to make people's life easier. When they're traveling, they get some concession, they get some exception to the rule. So we call this a rukhsa, or a concession, meaning like Allah is giving you an easier way to do things. So when you're traveling, you're allowed to shorten your prayers. Now, shortening your prayers basically means all the 4-unit prayers will become 2 units. So Zuhr, Asr, and Isha from 4 units, then you're going to pray 2 units. Assalamu alaikum. What about Fajr prayer? Are you going to make it half and do 1 rakah? No, it's not having everything. What about Maghrib? Are you going to make it 1.5? No. So it's only the 4s become 2s. Now, someone may think that, hey, you know what? I'm feeling good. I'm traveling, but, I'm staying in a nice hotel, and, like a 5-star hotel, and I was traveling first class and everything's comfortable and everything. Let me go ahead and pray the 4 rakahs, 4 units anyways, because I'm not really facing any difficulties. I'm really living in comfort. So now when it comes to taking the exceptions, the concessions that Allah has given you, there are some things where it's more pious to not take them and to do what's originally there. Like, for example, like wiping over your socks. If you don't wipe over your socks and you take off your sock every single time and you wash your feet for wudu, we talked about wiping over socks, right? If you wash your feet for wudu, is it better to do that than wipe over your socks?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, it is better. So things like that, when it comes to concessions, if you're fasting in Ramadan and you're traveling, you don't have to fast. You can fast later. But if you say, you know what, I think I can handle it, I'm okay, I can still fast. Is it better to fast even though you're traveling? Yes, it is. So there are sometimes, only sometimes, where it is better to take the exception even if you're feeling good. This is one of those times. So shortening of the prayer is something that you should take as the general principle, even if you say, I have the energy and I can do 4. I have no problem with doing all 4. This is the one of the few where it's better to take the exception rather than to leave the exception. So you should try to pray the 2 units instead of the 4, and not insist on doing 4. So then the question is, when do you start? So let's say you're traveling on a long journey, you're going to New York, or you're going to traveling to Mecca, for example. When can you start shortening your prayers? Right? So you're at home and you have a flight that's going to be leaving in a few hours. Can you start shortening your prayers inside your house? Because you're not traveling yet. So you cannot start shortening your prayers until you start traveling, right? So what is the definition, the technical definition of that you're traveling? So you're intending to travel. You're on your way all the way to Mecca. You're about to travel, you're going to the airport. Once you leave your city limits, then you can start shortening your prayer. So let's say you're on your way to the airport. Airport is 1 hour away. Once you've crossed your city limit beyond that, and then you stop at a gas station and you say, you know what, I need to pray because I'm not going to make it to the airport in time. You're praying at the gas station or at another masjid or something that you found. Now you're already considered a traveler. Even though you only traveled like 15 miles, you're still a traveler because you've already set out on your long journey and you've crossed your city limits, right? So that's when you start getting into the category of being a traveler. Now you're going to remain in the state of being a traveler, and you can keep on shortening your prayers until one of two things happens: until you return back home, or until you stay in one place for 15 days or more. Okay, now this is one opinion among the scholars. Another opinion is Imam Shafi'i's opinion, which is 3 days. Is much shorter duration. So this is 15 days or 3 days. So I go with the 15 days. So if you're going to stay in one place and you say, I'm staying here for 15 or more days, I'm not a traveler anymore, right? Because it's kind of like it's another residency. But if you're 14 days or if you're 7 days and you're staying there, even if you're staying in a hotel, you're staying in a family, friend's home or whatever it is, you're still considered a traveler because you're away from home. As long as you're away from home, and you're not staying in another location more than 15 days, you're still a traveler. When you get back home, you're no longer a traveler anymore. So you got to make sure that as soon as you arrive home, you're not going to, you're not going to be shortening your prayers anymore. Yeah.
So what does that entail? Kind of staying in the same place for 15 days? Not to get like too technical, but like, does that mean like staying amongst
region, like a city?
Like a city.
Like a city.
So if you're going from like city to city to city, like resets for 15 days.
It resets, keeps on resetting. Exactly. Yeah. All right. So if somebody is traveling and they're shortening their prayers, but they become the imam. So they walk into a masjid and they put that person forward and they say, we would like you to lead the prayer for us. Remember, it's recommended to not take this exception and not pray for. So let's say it's Isha prayer and somebody comes and says, we'd like you to lead the prayer, and you're with a group of people and they all live there, but you're a traveler, you're from out of town. So you're supposed to be shortening your prayer. Even though you're leading the prayer and the people behind you are not shortening the prayer, you still shorten your prayer. So what do? You lead the prayer and you're going to pray 2 units. And as soon as you're done and you say the last Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, you're going to tell the people behind you, say, complete your prayer because I'm traveling. So what they're supposed to do is they're not supposed to finish their prayer. They're supposed to stand up, get up, and complete their prayer. One of the good things to do is before you start the prayer, you should remind people who don't know. Say, hey, I'm from out of town. You asked me to lead the prayer. I'm going to be praying only 2. So complete your prayer. And then when you finish the prayer, you remind them one more time. For anybody who came late and they weren't paying attention, they're like, what? Probably wondering, like, what's going on? Oh, this guy's finished. They don't even know. Maybe they don't know what rak'ah you're on. So you remind them and say, hey, by the way, they see everyone else standing up. Say, you know what? Complete your prayer because I'm somebody who's traveling. So they're supposed to go and complete 2 more units of prayer. Now, question about what is the distance for travel, right? This is something that has been discussed among scholars. And they say, what is the minimum distance? So if I travel from my house to the masjid and it's 20 miles away, let's say, or let's say I go to work every day and it's 20 miles away. Do we consider that to be traveling, like a journey? It's not a journey. You're just commuting to work, right? So what happened is that many scholars, what they did was they said, well, In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they used to use camels. And when they would travel by camel, what they would do is they wouldn't be able to traverse that many miles. So they said the journey on a camel of that time was about 48 miles or 52 miles, about 50 miles. So they said, okay, you know what? Even though the means of transportation has changed to faster vehicles, we go with the mileage anyways. So as long as you cross the 50 miles, you're still considered to be a traveler. Now, this is what several scholars have said. Now, this is not my opinion. Because there are people who drive to work every day, 55 miles. Every single day, they're going to be shortening their prayers because they're traveling to work and then they're traveling back. That's not a very good measure. So the thing is, the people in the past, scholars in the past, they've actually looked at and they said when you travel by ship, you should not be using the same amount of miles as traveling by camel, because ship is much faster than a camel. Just with the wind and everything goes faster. Now that we have airplane travel, now that we have car travel and all of that, we shouldn't be sticking, my view is that we shouldn't be sticking to the 48, 50 mile limit anymore. Instead, we should look at what do we generally consider, because the 48 miles or whatever, this is not coming from the Prophet, peace be upon him. This was an extrapolation made by the scholars based upon a 3-day journey on a camel. So you can travel about on 3 days very comfortably with the caravan. You could do 48 miles. It's very different, right? In a journey, we could do that in an hour, right? So instead, what we should do is we should say, in our culture, what is considered a journey? What is not considered a journey? What is considered traveling and what is not considered traveling? So if you go to work and it's 75 miles away, but you drive every single day, you drive there and you drive back. And the next day you drive there and you drive back. And many people do this. Many people drive 75 miles in Southern California. It's actually quite common for a lot of people. They do that distance. We're not going to consider that to be travel. But travel would probably be a good, basically, if you can go to a place and come back the same day, that day trip is usually not in the category of travel. If you're going to go somewhere and it's going to be an overnight journey because it's far enough to be an overnight journey, then that is going to be a definition of travel. So just to give you an example, so if you're traveling, for example, to San Diego, if you drive to from Orange County to San Diego, or Orange County to Santa Barbara, just a little bit further, or maybe about the same, and you say, I'm just going to go there, I'm having lunch with my client, and I'm going to drive back. That's not a journey. That doesn't count as a journey. But if you're going to, let's say, Orange County to Las Vegas, 4-hour trip, no one's going to make it back in time. You're going to San Francisco, San Jose, no one's going to make it back in time, right, on the same day. So that is definitely travel. The other one, kind of like a gray area, right? So that's generally what I follow. This is the opinion of Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah. It's also the opinion of Sheikh Yasir Qadi and many other scholars. Okay. And then the next one is air travel. So if you're traveling by airplane, there's a few rules that you need to keep in mind. Number one is that when you're on an airplane, you need to find space to pray. So it's very cramped. So if you're in first class, first, thank Allah that you're able to afford first class. No one here. So, but if you're in first class, you have enough space. So you got to stand up and you got to do the full prayer. And that's one way of thanking Allah for getting first class ticket, right? So you got to do the entire prayer. If you're sitting in economy class, right, and it's cramped and there's no space to, stand up or do the prayer or do the ruku or anything like that, then in that case, you're allowed to sit down and perform the prayer. Now, some places, they're going to have a little prayer area. Very few places, like Saudi Airlines, they have a little prayer area. Some places, they have like a little bit extended kitchen in the back. If it's like one of the really big airplanes, you can ask the flight attendant, hey, when is a good time I could perform my prayer in the corner here? When you guys are not serving food and it's not going to be busy, is there a place I can do that? Some big planes, they will give you the spot. You should do it there. Some places, they will not give you the spot and they'll say it's really not convenient. We can't do that. There's so many people going to the bathroom, or you have like 20 Muslims on the plane, and they all want to pray. If all 20 Muslims want to pray, it becomes very, very difficult for the passengers and for everybody else. So in that case, you can sit down in your seat and perform the prayer, just like the injured person we were talking about. So you're going to be sitting down, and if you can't perform the ruku', you can't perform the full sajda, you're going to gesture, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. You're going to gesture lower, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, going all the way down, so you can perform the prayer on the airplane. So that's one issue, is finding the space. And what about the direction of the Qibla? So if you are in first class, or if you're in a big plane where you can actually pray in the back and there's space for you, you need to try to figure out what the direction of the Qibla is. This used to be a problem 20 years ago. You'd have to go and say, hey, can you ask the flight attendant to ask the pilot, what direction are we flying in right now? And then you try and figure out what direction the Qibla is and all that stuff. Nowadays, it's not really difficult, because most planes, especially international planes, they have a little feature in their entertainment system which shows the direction that that you're flying in, and you get a whole map, and you can just look at the map and be like, oh, look, Makkah is in that direction, and we're flying in this direction, Makkah is in that direction. You can figure it out. Okay? So that's one way to go about it. There's another way to go about it. If, let's say, you're in an airplane that doesn't have that capability for whatever reason, and you knew that it's not going to have that capability, you go to a website called halaltrip.com. Halal Trip is an amazing website. So what you do is you put in your departure airport and time, and you put in your arrival airport and time, and it's going to give you all the prayer times for every single prayer while you're on the airplane. And it's going to give you the direction of where your airplane is going to be and what direction you need to turn to for the Qibla for every single prayer time throughout your journey. So they will calculate the trajectory of the airplane, and they will give you the time, and they will give you the direction. So it's an absolutely amazing service. So those are the three things that you need to try to figure out on an airplane. Number one, finding space. If there's space, you need to use the space. So if you're on Saudi Airlines and they have the little masjid there, you can't be like, I'm just going to pray in my seat. You cannot do that. You have to pray in the place because there's space for you to stand. If you're in first class, you got to pray because you got enough. Usually you have enough space to at least stand and at least do the bowing, maybe such that maybe not. Usually you do. So you have to do that. So finding space is one issue. Finding the direction is the second issue. And calculating the time, which you can do in advance with Halal Trip, is the third issue. So for most people, they probably will not find the space, so they're allowed to sit in the chair. For most people, they will not be able to, if you're sitting in your chair, you can't face the direction of, you can't move towards the Qibla, like if it's this way or whatever it is. So there's no point of like trying to turn sideways or something that you can't do that. So you probably, most people, they won't have to worry about space because they can sit down because there's no space. Most people will not have to care about calculating the direction because if you're sitting down, especially if you're in economy, you can't face the Qibla anyways because you're stuck in your direction. So you just pray in whatever direction you are. What you need to worry about is calculating the time. So before you get on a flight, you go to halaltrip.com and you calculate those times and you save it or you print it out and you have the times with you and it'll tell you exactly what the times are. And you need to make sure that you're doing those times in your local time zone where you are on the airplane. Okay. The last thing about travel is combining. So we talked about shortening prayer when you're traveling. There's also something called combining prayers as well. What combining prayers means is that you're going to pray Zuhr and Asr prayer together back to back at this, like right next to each other in the time for Zuhr or the time for Asr, whichever time you want. And you're going to combine Maghrib and Isha prayer either in the time for Maghrib or in the time for Isha back to back together. And because you're traveling, you're going to be shortening as well. So when you're combining, you're going to be shortening. But here's what a lot of people don't understand is that the number one rule for traveling is shortening your prayer. And like I said, sometimes when there's an exception for you, a concession or rukhsa, it's better to take it it's better to leave it most of the time, but sometimes it's better to take it. Shortening the prayer is better to take it, right? And shorten the prayer, even if you feel fine. When it comes to combining the prayers, it's not in the same category. It's better to leave it, all right? If you can, if it's comfortable for you. So there are a few opinions here. The opinion of the Hanafi school and some of the Maliki school is that you're not allowed to combine prayers when you're traveling. You're allowed, you shorten the prayers, but you're not allowed to combine them. The opinion of the Shafi'i school is that you're allowed to combine the prayers anytime you're traveling. And the opinion in the Hanbali and some of the Maliki schools is that you only combine the prayers when you're traveling between two cities. When you arrive somewhere in a city, you will shorten, but you will not combine. And that's the opinion that I personally follow in my own life. Because when I arrive at like a hotel and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to shorten because I'm traveling, but it's so convenient. I'm like in a nice hotel. There's like a conference. There's no real difficulty anymore. I'm not traveling. I'm not really traveling between two places. I'm at a place. So this is kind of the opinion that I lean towards myself. But if I'm in an airplane or if I'm in an airport or something like that, I will combine because, you know, waking up for, two prayers or if time zone is off or something like that. Okay, so I'll open it up for questions. Sure. Any questions on this?
Basically, it means like, for instance, if we're traveling the long distance, like for instance, from United States to Europe,
Yes.
and basically, like according to Hanbali school of like those, you can basically combine, right?
Yes.
When you basically either when you depart or whether you're basically
When you're in transit, basically.
Yeah.
When you're in transit. Yes, exactly.
Basically, like you pray 2 rakah and then give salam and then immediately pray another one, right? How do you?
Yes, you pray 2 rakat, give salam, and then immediately get up and you pray another one. Yes, exactly. The Zohar, only Zohar and Asr and Maghrib and Isha. You can't combine any of the other prayers. Only these two and these two. Okay. Yes.
Wait, so the way you said that you do it like you follow like what the Hanbali school says, right? Like you could do it if you're traveling like on a plane or somewhere, you could combine.
Yes.
But then-
Shorten and combine. Yeah.
But then if you arrive at the place, you can't combine, right?
You can you shorten, but you don't combine.
But that's what the Hanbali should.
Hanbali and some of the Malikis.
Oh.
And that's kind of like the in-between. So Hanafi say you're not allowed to combine it all, ever. The Shafi say you combine anytime you want, no matter how comfortable you are. This is kind of like a middle position. That's why I kind of lean towards it myself. Okay.
A random question.
Yeah.
Like, not even related to travel or anything, but I know that some, I don't even want to say like certain groups, they combine during like times of like heavy rain or storms, like we've seen like recently. Like what schools of thought, like
Yeah,
describe that?
so Shafi'i school and some other schools. So if it's heavy rain and there's actually like a danger of traveling, then yes, it makes sense to combine.
And it's only at the masjid.
This is only at the masjid. Yes, this is only at the masjid. But again, you have to keep in mind the context. So the context is Medina.
Mhm.
It's a place that didn't have paved roads. You'd be walking through the mud, to get to the thing. Today, there's like light to medium rain. People jump in their car. They got their umbrella, right? And they're like, they don't even get a drop of water on them. They're like, we're gonna combine. Based on what? It's not the same. So it's very important to understand the context there. Yeah.
One more question, like maybe you discussed on previous lecture, but what if, for instance, you're in a plane and you need to take wudu and like basically you cannot take wudu like while we're traveling?
Why can't you take wudu?
I mean, it's small. Like,
It's small, it's hard, but making wudu in the plane, best thing is to make wudu before you get on the plane, right? But in terms of making wudu on the plane, you should try your best. Even though it's inconvenient, it's uncomfortable, you should try your best to make it and try your best to wipe up when you're done.
I mean, for instance, if you want to wash your legs, foot, for instance, basically you can wipe probably, I guess, right?
No, so you can wipe over your socks, which is easier, right? But if you fulfill all the requirements. So go back to the old videos where we talked about the requirements for wiping over socks. If you fulfill those, that's probably what's recommended, make your life easier, right? Make sure you meet the requirements of the socks before you get on the plane so that you can make all the other parts of wudu and you can wipe over the socks.
And your rukhsah is like extended in state of travel as far as like wiping up your socks, right?
Yeah, it goes to 72 hours instead of
72
24 hours. Yes. Okay. Anything else? Okay, inshallah. So next week we will move on to food and drink. All the food and drink that is halal and haram. We'll start that chapter next week, inshallah. All right. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum.